One. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This is Grant Cameron from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I have my good friend again, Melinda Leslie, because we didn't finish up on our last conversation. Melinda's got a lot of information, and she's put it out in two recent videos that we discussed in our first session, but we'll talk a little bit about that again today. She's probably the foremost expert in the world on MILABs, highly knowledgeable on abductions, and is one of the somebody with me. I think we're the sort of the two main people in the world who are into the working group, the Avery, the Invisible College, the Cosmic Club, whatever you want to call it. Both Melinda and I have been following these people around, listening to them, watching what they do for probably the last 3 decades. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. Good afternoon, Melinda. You're in Sedona, Arizona. Maybe promote your town, Sedona, and what you do, your little job that you do there.
Okay.
Big job.
By the way, I like your little stuffed UFO in the background. That's very cute.
Yeah, I got that from Toronto. I got it when somebody gave it to me from Toronto. Lori gave it.
At some point, I'll have to pick up my computer and show everyone my map on the wall. But the wall behind me is nothing. But I do have stuff in here. Although this is mostly a space for my doing readings. And admittedly, it's kind of a mess right now, but before we go, I'll pick up my computer. But I have this giant map on the wall with pins in it of local UFO and paranormal events. Wow. And a few other things. But it's like I tried to make a reading space, yet I couldn't get away from the UFO stuff. So I have that too. So
you're at a New Age center, right?
Yeah, I'm at the Center for the New Age. That's the name of it, the Center for New Age, here in Sedona, Arizona. Kind of my main gig, if you will, what I call my bread and butter job, is I do a UFO sighting tour where I take people out with military night vision goggles. Somewhere around here, I've got a brochure on it. Anyways, UFO sighting tours. Here, I've got a business card at least.
Do you usually have somebody every night that comes there?
Here it goes. I have a brochure somewhere, but there you go. I'll put that up to the camera.
There you go.
The business card for it. But anyways, so my UFO sign tours is my main bread and butter job, like I said. I had an amazing tour last night. Oh my God. And last night was tour number 1095. So that's how many I've done. Wow. 1095. Well over, I kind of stopped counting, but well over 7,500 clients that I've taken out.
Do you
last
document
night
their
I had about
sightings?
10 people.
Do you document their sightings? They must have bizarre sightings that they relate to you. Give you confidences or stories?
Yeah. Sometimes people share stuff with me. When I first started doing these tours 8.5 years ago, in March will be 9 years. And when I first started doing them, after like my first couple of hundred, initially I was a little bit surprised how many people, I wasn't surprised how many people would open up and share sightings. Yeah. What was a little bit of a surprise is how many people would open up and start sharing their contact experiences and abductions. Okay. And it ended up being a lot of people. Now I'm no longer surprised if someone comes on my tour and they open up, and sometimes you can tell they're opening up and sharing in front of family members or friends that they've never said it to. Sometimes their family members will look at them like, what? Yeah. And yet often people ask me about my experiences. So if I start talking about mine, which I don't always on every tour, the deal is you got to ask me, because not everyone who comes on the tour is into it. But if you ask me, and I'll kind of gauge where where I was gonna say my audience, but where my clients are at, because if there's a couple people there who've had experiences, I'm going to go more in depth than people who are scoffing or acting somewhat skeptical. Okay. And I'm going to be different if I have children present on the tour versus only adults. Yeah. So, so I kind of gauge what I'm going to say. But if people ask me, and I usually have a mixed crowd, I never know till last minute if I'm going to have all adults or a lot of kids or international. I mean, I take people out from all over the world. Last night, as a matter of fact, I had, you've probably met Chuck Fay from Hong Kong. I'm sure you have. Blonde guy. Yeah, you know Chuck, right? We all do. He comes to the UFO conferences, and he has helped me with my sky watches at conferences before. And he brings tour groups from Hong Kong. Well, last night, 2 ladies came from Hong Kong who said Chuck had recommended this, and he came with a TV crew actually more than once and has filmed me for television in Hong Kong. And what's really fun is they said they saw me on the TV show. They became friends with Chuck Fay, the host of the show, on Facebook. And then he highly recommended, when they said they were coming to Sedona, he said, you must go meet Melinda and do this. So they came on the tour and were telling me all about their friendship online with Chuck, and it was very cute. And so they had seen the TV show and met him. And then I had another couple from Germany, lovely young couple from Germany. And of course, everyone else speaks perfect English. We're the only ones who don't. You guys are different. You guys in Canada, you know more languages, I'm sure, but we're, you know, here in the US, you know, but anyway, so, and the lovely couple from Germany. And then I had some return clients, a family that had come with me before a couple times. Last time was over 3 years ago though. So I looked at them, I said, you guys look familiar. They said, yeah, we've been with you, but the last time was like 3 years ago. So they came, you know, so I had this wonderful mixed group. And at the end of the night, now it had been kind of I mean, we had sightings, but it was a relatively ho-hum night, you know, kind of very average until the very end. At the very end, we had a large red light come over us, not blinking, solid light, the whole thing glowing kind of mostly red, occasionally kind of orange, you know, amber light, you know, as we know in ufology. So giant amber light, you know, at arm's length, about the size of a dime, comes over us and goes over us and then keeps going, and never blinked. And we were flashing at it with the laser. It flashed back at us twice.
Wow.
Where we got it flashing back, but the rest of the time it didn't flash at all. The rest of the time it was just a big red glow. I told my clients if that thing had been any closer, we would have seen structure, you know, structured craft, but it wasn't quite close enough. But it was a big red light and was late in the evening, and it was definitely, I mean, we had sightings already and some pretty good ones earlier in the night. We saw a bunch of things that as they take off for space and dim out above us, they'll speed up. So we had a couple of things last night that did that. Nothing, sometimes stuff as it goes will zigzag. We didn't necessarily get that, but we did get things that were speeding up dramatically, you know, and going faster as they went out. And we had one object early in the evening that flashed back at us a couple times. So we got reactions from one, and then we had a couple speed up, and then a bunch of very, you know, average things. But then all of a sudden that ended up being really that, because of its closeness. And it was, you know, it was close, obviously completely silent, just a big red glowing thing. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So that was a really nice thing last night. And for return clients and people sent on the tour by Chuck, and, you know, so it ended up making for a very special night. Anyways, but that's what I do. Like I said, 1,095 tours. So that's.
Do you do this at conferences as well? And I hear you have some upcoming conferences. Maybe you can sort of promote that. I think you do this for various conferences as well. Yeah,
there's two upcoming conferences that I'll promote. One I'm just speaking at, not doing a skywatch. It's in San Francisco, so it's in an area with a lot of, you know, light pollution and whatnot. So it doesn't really work unless you know, travel 45 minutes to an hour outside of town, you know, in the Bay Area. But that's in the end of February. It is called UFO Con. It's hosted by yours and my dear friend, Lorian Fenton, who's the producer of it. And this year she's really focusing on people who are contactees and abductees, people with direct experience. So that's kind of the theme this year. And she has some well-known people with direct experience who are speaking. And then she has some people that have never spoken before, which her audience always really likes. But if she has them at her conference, you know that they have an amazing story, amazing evidence. I mean, she doesn't just have anyone. She handpicks people. She'll, you know, find people that are really, really great that have been referred to her, that she's met. And she'll say, okay, 2 years from now, when I do another conference, I'm having you talk, you know, and she'll keep them on the back burner. So she has this amazing lineup. So everyone, please check out the website for UFOCon2020.com. So it's UFOCON2020.com. Again, UFOCon2020.com. And that takes you directly to the website. It doesn't have all the speakers listed yet. I think she's got about 12 of us, and I think there's going to be about 20 or over 20. So, there are great people already listed. I'm one of them that, I'm grateful. Now, here's the deal. Now, everyone, we're doing this, you and I, because I recently did these 2 presentations, lectures, full lectures, long lectures, over 2 hours each, almost 3 hours, including questions, for UFO Denmark, okay? And that was done online via Zoom, Zoom and Skype, so we did that. And I was really grateful that they just kind of gave me, almost endless time, and their questions were also really good. So even the question part is really good on both. So I'm really proud of those. And one, of course, was on the MILABs, as we already, did the last part, in case people didn't see part 1. One part was on the MILABs, military involvement in abductions. Whoops, I'm gonna
There's the military now.
Okay, there.
Black ops are phoning you up.
Yeah, black ops are calling. Yeah. Hey, the other day in my new place, I just moved last weekend into a new little house here in Sedona that I'm running. And I had a big black helicopter. Now they come and land at our airport, and I happen to live right next to Airport Mesa right now. So, I can't get worked up over. But one was kind of circling out in front for a while, and I went, but I'm sure it was just circling to come in and refuel at the airport, but not because of me. Hey, Black Ops guys, if you're trying to intimidate me, you're going to need to land in my backyard.
Do better than that,
I'm not gonna have a clue. I'm just going to think you're landing at the airport, So, hey, it has happened, not where I am, but in other places, absolutely, more than once, and hovered. And had guys leaning out the door with a camera. Wow. Where my neighbors even saw them. My neighbors came out once when I lived in Corona del Mar, and they're leaning out the door with a camera. And my neighbors are like, God, it's like we live in LA and people try to photograph her from helicopters. Wow. But it was a giant black helicopter and a guy in camouflage. It's like, no, not people photographing us. That would be the military.
So why would they be photographing to get onto that? Like what's, I can see why they'd pick you up and, try to get information, but why the hovering and the cameras?
Intimidation.
Just intimidation?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's meant to be intimidation, sometimes too with abductees, when they have the quote, black helicopter harassment, sometimes these things have forward-looking infrared on them, radar dishes on them, a lot of other electronics. There's this Leisha Davidson, well-known abductee living in Southern California in the Sierra Madre area. Kept having black helicopter harassment very extensively. One day she takes a photo. It's this amazing photo, which I thought I had, but I haven't seen it in a long time. So I need to dig through some old stuff to see if I have it. If not, I have to contact her. She has a person leaning out the side doors of this helicopter, military person, obviously, in a harness, leaning way out with a harness with a telephoto lens pointed at her, long telephoto lens. Big long thing. She has an Instamatic. Gets a picture of him leaning out with a telephoto lens, and she takes the picture of him with an Instamatic.
Wow.
And so, I think, well, surveillance, obviously. I mean, if they're, spending the money, the fuel, the personnel, there's probably maybe more than one purpose involved, like obviously intimidation. It would be part of it, but also surveillance, like actually, taking photos of where you live or the front of your house or whatever, So I've had a number of black helicopter harassments, not in a very long time, unless that was one the other day, but I truly think it was probably circling to land at the airport, but it was on a different pattern than usual, which I kind of watched it for a while. So maybe they were checking out that I moved and I was in a new place. I wouldn't put it past them, but when one hovers, I mean, when I lived in Corona del Mar, there was no reason to have one really low hovering over the house right in front of me, where those neighbors came out and looked up at it, and the people across the street saw it, so that obviously was very deliberate. I've been online interviewing an abductee, had one come and hover and circle, and so did they. So we're having an interview, you know, I'm talking to them on the phone actually at the time, and both of us were having black helicopter harassment. So, you know, it can get pretty blatant, but
can I ask you a question, another question?
Sure.
And I think Jim might have brought this up. I mean, the idea about the cost, what I always wonder about is, what if they happen to crash? Like you when they went in to get bin Laden, they have their stealth helicopter, they crash the helicopter. What would be the repercussions if the American people suddenly realized that they were abducting American citizens from taxpayer money? I mean, have you considered that?
It's interesting that you should say that. There's a famous case.
Oh.
There's a very, very famous case. Oh God, I haven't talked about this in a long time, so I have to refresh my memory. It was in Florida, and I'm thinking it was Leah Haley.
Okay. Yeah, I knew Leah.
If not, it was someone else equally famous, like Cat Wilson or Leah Haley or some famous abductee. Okay.
Okay.
They had a MILAB abduction. They were on a helicopter, and the helicopter did crash.
Wow.
Okay. Now there was another time, and I may be confused with Leah because there's another time where she was abducted, was on a black helicopter. It landed in a field, and she was escorted up. She was off the helicopter, and she was in her nightgown, and it left, and she had to figure out how to get home in her nightgown because it dropped her off in a field, not at home, and who knows why. Maybe there was, God only knows, unless it was just meant to be intimidation or somebody screwed up or who knows. But I think it was again her, and if not her, I need to refer to find out who this was. But they were on a helicopter. It did crash on the beach or coast. A boat came in from the shore, and they were taken out on this boat. So as opposed to something on land picking them up, she was picked up and taken on a boat and taken out on this boat. Unless I have that backwards, the other possibility is she was abducted on a boat. No. After it crashed, they took her out on the boat. I'm almost certain of that. So after it crashed, they took her out on the boat, and then she wasn't sure from there how she made it home, but they, you know, obviously drugged her and did whatever, you know, knocked her out probably. But and this was all very conscious, you know, completely conscious. I'm leaning towards it being Leah Haley again, and I'm leaning towards John Carpenter doing the regressions on that for her.
Where is Leah Haley these days? The last time I talked to her, she said she'd had enough and she was getting out. Is she around? Because I haven't seen her for a number of years.
Her teenage and then what became grown kids like disowned her over it, and she wanted that connection again. And I think there were starting to be grandbabies and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think it was a matter of wanting kind of her life back, you know, and the kids, to have that relationship with the kids, she had to either, you know, be disowned by the kids or disown ufology. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, that's understandable. That happens often. I know.
Yeah, it actually happens a lot with abductees.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of very public abductees, when you go, well, where are they now? Well, they wanted a career. They wanted a family. They wanted grandkids, you know, and now some people fade away and come back, like, thank God, Debbie Jordan, who just spoke for International UFO Congress just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And luckily, you know, she pulled out of the field for a while and now she's back. You know, obviously, case in point is oh, come on a little bit. Pascagoula case, Calvin.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, was gone for like 40 years and came back. Okay. So now some people just want to lay low. Some people do it for family. Some people do it for career, you know, but even some people who were maybe really in the public for a long time lay low for a while. a lot of times it's also because their MILAB stuff got really bad, that they didn't want to, you know, that if they can intimidate you into silence, they will. Now, I always tell people, are like, how do I make this stop? I said, you always have two choices as far as the MILAB stuff.
Okay.
One is be very public, talk a lot, be very, very public, constantly talk about when they do stuff to you, they'll leave you alone because you're a liability and you're bringing too much attention and da-da-da. The other is when it increases and it gets really bad, drop out. So I said, those are your two choices. You either got to go more public or pull out. They want you to pull out. And they probably aren't going to leave you alone, you know, and certainly the ET stuff will still happen, you know. So, but with the MILAB stuff, the only thing that's really been proven to really make them leave you alone, or leave you alone at least more the majority of the time, is be really public. Yeah. But, you know, that's a tough thing because people, they have families and careers and stuff, and they don't want to necessarily be on the lecture circuit and television and blah, blah, whatever, and radio.
Can I ask, know, what are the three main things?
It's a tough decision to do that. And you open yourself up to a lot of ridicule. Now I do UFOs full time, so that helps that I have a life and stuff that allows for it, but most people don't. You know, most people don't.
What are the three main things that you think that they're doing with the MILABs? Why? Because it's a high risk operation. So what are their main objectives to grabbing people?
Oh, sure. There's always four things I'm pointing to. So you're testing me here without my notes or my PowerPoint in front of me.
This is the final exam you're having here.
Yeah, final exam. Okay. There's four major areas of interest that they're interested in. One is ET agenda and motives. What do we know about an ET agenda and motives? And a lot of that gets into consciousness, as you well know. Yeah. And a lot of that you're very well versed in, and probably your audience is. So a lot of that gets into consciousness. A lot of that agenda motives gets into the hybridization program too. So, ET agenda and motives. Then the next, because it goes hand in hand with that, is the genetics. Has your DNA been altered or changed? Are the ETs interested in you for genetic purposes or breeding purposes? You know, so again, you have agenda and motives, then you have the DNA, genetics, hybridization program stuff. And I'll put that as, you know, I'll call it DNA second. Okay. The third one, so in other words, the covert guys are questioning you and interrogating you about ET agenda motives. The covert guys are looking into, has your DNA been affected or changed? And or are you being used in that way by the ETs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's number two. Number three is your psi abilities, psychic ability. Do you remote view, do psychokinesis, telekinesis, you know, do you have advanced abilities? Have you been trained or enhanced in some way by the ETs for that? Can you do it repeatedly? So the whole psi component, PSI, in other words, component of the phenomena, okay? So that's the third thing they're interested in. And the fourth thing they're interested in is the technology. And sometimes that's the first one. These can change order. There's not really an order. They're all, I guess they're all equal, actually. So the technology, have you navigated a ship? Have you flown a ship? Have you been shown how the propulsion or the navigation system works? Have you been shown languages, ET languages, alphabet, math formulas, that kind of stuff? So it gets into the whole technology, meaning all the aspects of it combined with ET learning and, you know, and then I'll throw in a fifth, which I used to kind of downplay, but I can't. It's such a huge part of it, which is the practice and development of mind control techniques, that they're practicing that on the abductees, that they're developing, that they're using everything they got in the books, you know, everything they got in the labs, you know, on you. So that's a big part of it. And ET mind control, because a lot of the alien abduction contact experience is not only the consciousness and the psi part, but there's the mental manipulation, and the mental enhancement parts. So I'll say mind control and mental enhancement, separate from paranormal and psi, you know. So mind control, mental harassment, paranormal and psi, the technology, the genetics, and the DNA, and alien agenda and motives. So they're very interested, and I call it, a lot of people have a hard time wrapping around their head about what I'm about to say. But just like there's a crash retrieval on a craft or whatever technology, right? There's reverse engineering. Okay, how does it work? Can we develop it? Can we apply it to our technology? There's a huge, it's not just, can we build a disc or craft? Yes, there's that, but it's also, what can we get out of that technology that we can apply to other things? Can we advance our technology and our ability to interact with ETs? And, you know, so the reverse engineering of the technology is obviously a huge, huge program. Well, I call this the reverse engineering of the abductees and contactees. And I'm also meeting more and more contactees, people who would consider themselves more a conscious contactee, who are also having the MILAB stuff happen. So it's not just abductee. And even, you know, we hate contactee, abductee, experiencer. Anyone who's any one of those things hates all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, none of it, what, you know, oh, you're an experiencer, you've had an experience, how stupid. You know, you're abducted, that makes it instantly sound negative when it's not necessary. Contact makes it sound like it's all like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go out and hold up a sign, come get me, you know. No, you know, it's like, no, you know. And people will label themselves when really it's all the same thing.
Yeah,
you know, it's all the same thing. So do most contactees also have, quote, abduction? Yeah. Do a lot of abductees also have a fully conscious participation? Yes. You know,
yeah.
And everything in between.
What I want to ask you, you raised a few new issues. The first one is, I think you've mentioned this before. I had if you know, I had an interview with Richard Doty a couple months ago, and he confirmed that he had worked for Hal for 12 years, and then Hal confirmed, yes, not that he worked for him, but that he was being used to help solve the mystery, whatever. And one of the things he mentioned was that Hal was brought pieces. Now this is Richard Doty talking, that he was brought pieces to figure out, how does this thing work? Can you work it? And I think you've mentioned the fact that people are given pieces of the craft, and if they're actual experiencers, they can actually make the piece do what it's supposed to do. Is that correct?
Sometimes. Now in in the MILAB experience, the military abduction, covert human involvement. I even hate to call it MILAB, really. The covert human involvement in the contactee scenario. So if you're a contactee / abductee and you're having covert human involvement, if you are re-picked up and you're in an experience, so you're kind of, you know, for what it's worth, abducted at the hands of covert human agencies, often they'll not only ask you and do medical things, experiments, and ask you questions, interrogate you about all those 5 categories I just said. But part of the technology part is not only questioning you about technology, what have you been seeing, but they'll often have you sit at some controls or hand you something to see if you know how to operate it or do it. Now, you know this, you know, I'm totally preaching to the choir here. You totally know there's a consciousness interface with the technology. Yeah. It is all psi, it's all psychokinesis and remote viewing is how you do the technology. Yeah. And so the abductee, contactee often is. Now, sometimes they don't know how they're able to do it, and other times they do. But so in a few cases, I've had, not in a handful of cases, I've had people, including myself, who were handed some technology to see if they knew how to operate it. Now, in my case, though, it wasn't, okay, actually, I've had that happen twice now that I think about it. One of them was operating a control panel, and myself, and I'll go ahead and say it because she's kind of been public about it, Jocelyn Buckner and her family and I, and another friend of mine, whose name I'll leave out right now without her permission, but 5 of us were taken together. At least with Jocelyn, I don't know if everyone else, but Jocelyn and I both were taken in this room where they had us move with like psychokinesis,
Yeah.
moving an object that was on a table. But behind it was this very odd control panel thing with little levers on it. As I looked at that, the levers and stuff started to move.
Wow.
And there was a guy, and so did Jocelyn. What I didn't realize, when they took me in this room, they took me right up to this panel and this other object, and there were a couple guys in lab coats, a guy in military uniform, and like a guy who was in a suit. And I think the guy or maybe even two guys in suits, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Jocelyn when she remembers there. But I think the guy in the suit and one of the military guys were talking. They were kind of like older guys. And after I moved the object and I was looking at the panel, the levers moved. One of them turned to the other and said, "We got another one." Meaning I was the one able to do that.
Yeah.
When they went to take me out of the room, I turned around, sitting in the back of the room in a little white, folding plastic chair, just a little folding chair, is Jocelyn. And she goes like this, 2 thumbs up, like.
I remember, to add a piece to the story, I remember her telling me that story when I was in Sedona, and I remember the recollection. She was like, you were giving them a hard time, like, you think I'm going to do that? Or like, it's sort of like you weren't very cooperative from what I heard in terms of going
Well, that
along.
was mostly our other friend who didn't cooperate and didn't do it.
Okay.
With me, it was, I remembered as I was more kind of feeling a little intimidated, like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. But I was kind of nervous, and Jocelyn broke the ice because I was being kind of nervous. Maybe I was a little bit like, what, but here they were like, okay, here's another one that just did it. And I turn around thinking I'm in the room by myself, except for here, there's like 2 guys in lab coats, a military guard, a guy in dress military, and a guy in a suit, or 2 guys in suits, So there's 5, 6 people easily.
Yeah.
And I turn around because a guard had come in the door behind me to like escort me out, and he turns me around, and sitting in the back of the room in a folding chair is Jocelyn with 2 thumbs up, and it broke the ice, and she was also like going, good job, like you did it too. And what's so funny is we both had conscious memory to some degree of this, but we also both separately got many, 6 months apart from each other, regressions by Yvonne Smith. And Yvonne said, Jocelyn gave me the thumbs up and that I saw her. I mean, she said, in both of our regressions, we remembered that. Yeah. There was also another point in a hallway. At the very end, they drugged us before taking us out up a tunnel to ground level, long story short. But we were in a medical facility briefly and offered the stuff in the Dixie cup, which they're infamous for doing.
Yeah.
And a little, cursory medical exam, and then here, drink this. Now that I did argue, maybe that's what she was talking about. I did argue with them about taking that. Now, Jocelyn wasn't in the room then, but I told her about it. So, but, and I'm like, no. And they said, look, you can't go home with your friends till you drink this. Wow. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, I am doing it. And they're like, no, you got to drink this to go home with your friends. So, but I go out this was a large mass abduction. There was easily about 100 people involved. Wow. And we're in a hallway with what had to be 30 to 50 people just in this one hallway at the end before they took us out on this road. And I'm standing there in this hallway, and it was kind of like a bridge to another area. It was like a enclosed hallway that was upstairs above a big work area down below. Not that matters, but anyway, so. And I'm sitting there in the hallway, and the drug they just gave me is like taking effect, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Wow.
And Jocelyn starts making fun of me in the hallway. Again, breaking the ice, What she did, she didn't say things. She leaned forward in my face with her eyes crossed and leaned to look at my face with her eyes crossed. And it just made me crack up. Like she was totally messing with me. But she had just done the same thing to her a couple minutes before. Yeah. So she knew what I was going through, that I was just a couple minutes behind her and experiencing the drug. And I was like, whoa, and she did. She crossed her eyes and looked in my face and made me crack up. Well, all the people in the hallway were like in afraid, mad, confused, and I start to crack up as she's looking in my eyes, and people are looking at us like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Like, why aren't you freaked out? What's, like we're laughing, her and I are laughing, and everyone's going like they're already freaked out. So our laughing is not helping,
Wow.
but that's like, when you've had enough of the experiences, just like in alien abduction or even contact, you get beyond that and you get to an interactive, very, positive interactive state, and even in these, even though they can be frightening, was I drugged? And I knew that drug was going to be a mind erase thing. But in that moment of still being fully conscious and everything, it was being able to make light of it, because I know I'm going to be returned in one piece. Jocelyn knew that, but there were people in that hallway who maybe had never had this happen before and were totally freaked out. So, maybe in the experience, we need to be mindful of the fact that this could be very difficult for the other people. I mean, it's very difficult for all of us, but she leaned in my face and made me laugh in that moment to, again, get over the fear, which at the moment I appreciated, but I think other people in the hallway did not appreciate.
You mentioned the DNA thing, and now you probably, you're aware that Kit Green and Gary Nolan are doing this sort of a public DNA thing where they're asking for donations, and they've approached you, I guess, for a donation.
They told one abductee that I've worked with, a MILAB case that I know of, her and her husband. They told them that they were doing this with over 40 people at this point. But they told her that they've been doing this with over 40 people, and that had to be at least 5, maybe even 8 years ago that they told her that. Well, they've done it, and I know new cases they've done it with. So obviously, who knows how many now? If that was 40, does that mean they're up to 80 people now? I don't know. Now, a couple very famous, excuse me, a couple very famous abductees, contactees that you and I are both familiar with, they've done this with.
Yeah, John Burroughs is pretty public that this has happened to him. John Burroughs is pretty public about it.
John Burroughs is pretty public that this has happened. And a little less public, but I think is pretty well known now, is yours and my friend
Whitley?
No. The guy with the dog and the blood.
Oh, Chris Bledsoe.
Chris Bledsoe. God, I don't know where my head is at today. My short-term memory is.
There's so many names to remember.
I know. Well, I think I slept funny last night too, so my short-term memory's lost. Okay. So Chris Bledsoe too. So, which for a while they hadn't, but eventually then Chris told me, oh, now they have.
Yeah.
Now, I not so much for the DNA material. Although I guess that got mentioned. I've had my conversation with Jim. Conversations was one time in person, face to face. We had lunch, his wife and I talked about in the part 1 of this, And then since then, there's been, I don't have an exact count. I would say 6 or 7, probably about 7 conversations since, maybe even 8, 6 to 8 conversations.
Yeah.
And in 2 of those conversations, he mentioned about wanting to do an MRI of me to see if I have the caudate putamen connection between. In neurology, there's these 2 sections of the brain, the caudate and the putamen, and they have found that there's this membrane between them that has more of these strands for people with high functioning paranormal abilities.
Yeah.
And I'll quote Jim Semivan here. He says, I think you have the caudate putamen to beat the band, and we'd like to see. So are you willing to get an MRI and stuff if we set that up? I said, yes, with only one major caveat. I get to know the results, and I want it in writing, that I get to know the results, and I want the results in writing. So I said, as long as I get the results, I'm willing to do it. There's no, my do anything with you guys and I don't get to know. No, I get to know.
And you get to be public about it?
Yeah, I think that was implied that if they kiss me, I can say they did. And then I think in one of those two conversations, I don't think, I'm fairly certain one of those two conversations, maybe even both of them, he said, oh, and we'll get, you know, blood and do the other stuff too. You know, so that would be, you know, blood, hair, whatever. Some other people that I know that they did this with, they took blood and got hair samples. I'm not sure what more than that, but saliva, blood, hair, either one or a combination or all, you know, one or two or all three, depending on who I talked to that they've worked with.
Wow.
And I said, sure. He said, well, you know, we'll probably get blood too. I said, yeah. I said, I want to know the results. I want to know what you guys come up with for me. Of course. I want to know if I've been affected or changed, you know?
Yeah.
Now, he knows I do a lot of paranormal stuff. These guys have known that for a long time. They've had an interest, and I even had one of them test me on a bunch of remote viewing stuff. So that's well known in my PK psychokinesis stuff.
Yeah.
So they haven't been extremely interested, but they've been interested enough. Now, Jim has said that he wants to come out here. I think I said this in the last thing we did, but he wants to come out here and talk to me for like 2 days all about my MILAB events. What you were just saying, he's very curious about, well, not just curious, he doesn't understand because he procured funding for Black projects. He oversaw huge covert ops while in the CIA. And in doing so, he had a lot to do with how the funding worked, how it was allocated, and the oversight of that. In fact, that kind of was his position for a while, was the oversight of funding for Black Ops. I have known enough to not ask him too in depth about it. That's one of those, maybe I don't want to know too much, but he wouldn't tell anyways. No, seriously.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Sure, I agree.
And I think I said in the last interview with you, when he said, you know, well, I don't understand how these things could be funded. I don't understand where the money's coming from. And I made a quip with him. That was when we were at lunch. And I said, well, what do you think's happening with your cocaine and CIA drug money? He didn't say anything. He just smiled. He just smiled and like nodded. Like, he just looked at me like, I can't believe you just said that. I'm like, well, what do you think is funding it? I said, you fund covert ops? I said, no. Wait, that's your job, right? Or that was? He said, yeah. I said, you tell me. He goes, I don't know. I said, no. How would you fund other stuff? He said, well, I can't tell you that. And I said, well, then you wouldn't be able to tell me this anyways. But I said, however you're doing that is probably how you're doing this too.
But
he claims that he knows about things like maglev trains, underground railway trains, underground bases, you know, all this kind of stuff, reverse engineering programs. But he said, but I don't know how they're able to do this. And I said, well, it's compartmentalized within that, you know. And I said, look, do I need to explain to you how compartmentalization works? No, I should be taking a 3-day workshop from you on how compartmentalization works. Yeah. You know, I said, look, you tell me.
Yeah.
You know, I would expect you to know, you know. So, but he says, I don't doubt that it exists. I just don't know how it can, you know. But he's very, very curious. Now, when he interviews me, is it because he really knows and he wants to see what I know? Maybe. I'm willing to take that risk. Or is it that he really doesn't know and he is truly curious and wants to understand?
Because nothing he said to you was threatening, correct? I mean, he was just an ordinary guy. It was very curious and asking you questions. He wasn't like, you know.
Oh, no. He's been, well, you know, he's been absolutely nice and charming.
Yeah.
You know, every time. Just a complete sweetheart. But as my good friend and yours, Daniel Sheehan, tells me, don't ever forget his background.
Yeah.
And I told him that. I said, look, we get along, we're friends, but I'll never forget your background, what you've done. You know, I mean, I told you about once probably, and I've said this to other people, I once had a phone conversation with George Knapp. I was helping Lorian Fenton when we were helping with, long story short, but this last spring with UFO MegaCon conference.
Yeah.
We were having Knapp come do a couple things there. Lorian Fenton got really busy, and she was really the go-between between all the speakers and arranging them. Okay, so because she was really busy, she asked me to call George, and George and I played phone tag. I had talked to him before on the phone, so it was, you know, we're very friendly. It's okay. So he had to call me back about something. He answered the question I'd left him a message about. And then he, out of the blue, he goes, there's something I have to ask you about. I go, what? There's this long pause, and he goes, you have some very interesting friends. This is Knapp. So I had a long pause, and I'm like, okay, Melinda, you know, on the fly was a good comeback. And I'm, so do you. And he says, and then there's a long pause, and then he says, yes, but my friends don't have people killed. And my best comeback I could come up with in the minute after a long pause is I said, yes, they do. And then he, long pause, and then he said, I suppose you're right. Okay. But I've always said since then, and one of these days, and Knapp, if you happen to see this, and I kicked myself at Congress because I forgot to do it, which is one of these days I'm going to say to George, I'm going to say, do you remember when you said I have interesting friends that can have people killed? And I'm going to say, you know, when my comeback was, and he'll probably go, what, I don't remember. And I'll say, well, my comeback was, so do you, but my comeback should have been, yes, but your friends just do it themselves. That should have been my comeback.
Another related question. I don't know if you brought it up with Jim, but you maybe can bring it up. When I was the first to sort of mention that Jim Semivan existed, this was probably 8 months or a year before Tom DeLonge went public. And the story I had been told and this agrees with what Dolan's being told by Kit Green, is the fact that when you're in the government, so when Jim Semivan's in the government, he really doesn't know what's going on. I mean, he has no idea. He's told to stay away from the subject, don't touch it. But the minute he leaves, according to Kit Green, the people, once you leave, you have very high security clearances, like when you're under contract. So then you go into private industry, and those are the people who
under private industry, the security clearances are higher. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Jim may not have known anything when he was in there because he didn't have a need to know. But once he gets, I don't know, it would be interesting to see how much did he learn about the UFO phenomena once he left the CIA. Not what he learned when he was in there. Because
look at the crowd he's hanging with. Whatever he didn't know, he's had a quick crash course in, because he, you know, he's gone on and on with me. One of his best friends is John Alexander, you know, and Hal Puthoff and Kit Green, and you know, so he's had and you know, and all the old NIDS guys, you know, so he's and Bigelow, and you know, so he's had a high-speed crash course. Now, again, I don't know how much he already knew. And I keep that in mind. Like Dan Sheehan says, never forget his background or anything. I keep in mind he might really know and be testing me, or he really has a strong desire to understand. I'll play along either way. Mm-hmm. Look, you know, I've been in this field a long time. People say, why do you talk to these guys? You know.
Yeah.
Well, first off, as far as, like I've said, even in the, in the last.
Black Ops again, they keep bugging you.
What was weird is that was just all zeros on my phone.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, that was just.
They want you to stop talking about whatever you were talking about. Stop talking.
Yeah.
Zero you out.
Yeah, I mean that was bizarre. The number that came up was all zeros. It's like,
wow,
whoa.
That's cool. Okay.
Okay. You know, years ago, I've been heavily, and people are like, why is she making light of these things? You guys, I've been really, really involved in this subject matter and studying these things for 30 years. And, you know, MILABs research for 28 of those 30 years, or at least 26 to 28 years, depending on how you kind of find it. And yeah, you know, 25 years ago, would I get really paranoid about stuff and be afraid to talk about stuff? Absolutely. Not anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and because of my candidness and lack of fear is why I have sit-down discussions with people like a Ron Blackburn,
Yeah.
like a Jim Sammy Van, and I would have no problem talking about this with Alexander or Puthoff or Green or anybody, because it's like, it, I also have learned over the years, as much as I've had happen, maybe also, like I said, because I'm so public and stuff, I'm also left alone a lot. Believe me, if I said or did the wrong thing, they'd probably say something to me or do something threatening. I mean, I've had some real tough MILAB experiences in the past. I mean, some really tough stuff. And I do not welcome that. But at this point, I think I'd have to really piss somebody off to have something like that happen.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate about you, because a lot of people say maybe we'll run into John Alexander, but they'll just sort of ignore him. Whereas you're like, send Melinda after him. Melinda's not scared of anybody. And it's like, so let me ask you, have you ever been threatened? Did they ever threaten you at any point? And that's what I appreciate it, because you need someone.
I walk away and they scratch their head like, what the hell? I mean, there's this funny story with Lorianne and I when we toured Bigelow. We were at
You told me that story. Yeah, go ahead.
The Society for Scientific Exploration and IRVA, International Remote Viewing Association, joined together. And that's the conference where Hal did his famous talk that Dolan is always referencing. Yeah. Anyway, and I was there in the audience, sitting with a couple other researchers and people next to me. Anyway, but including Lorianne. But afterwards, so we did this thing where we toured Bigelow, which was amazing. Who gets to do that? It was amazing. You guys, we didn't see metamaterials or anything. That's in another building. We didn't go in that building, but we saw the inflatable spaceships and stuff, which was really, really cool. Very cool. And but afterwards, there's this point where her and I go up to talk to Colm Kelleher, and a friend of hers is good friends with Colm. So she went up to say, I'm friends with so-and-so, and he wanted me to say, tell you hi and blah, blah, blah. So having this wonderful conversation, and they finish, and I go to, and he says, and you are? And I introduce myself, and he says, oh, nice to meet you. Did you enjoy the tour? Da, 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 da. I felt like someone behind me said my name. I turn around, and it wasn't true. No one said, but I was like, what? I turned back. Lorianne said at the moment that I turned around, like thinking there was someone trying to get my attention, she said, Colm's eyes rolled back in his head and his head jerked. And she said, he knew who you were.
That's what we want.
She said the look on his face, and she said his eyes rolled way back, his head jerked like, oh my God. And then I turned around and he's smiling like nothing happened. And she said, luckily she hadn't turned around. Luckily he thought neither of us were looking. She was looking right at him. Wow. And she said, oh my God, Melinda, you are so on their radar, So, and I said, well,
what did you ask Colm? You had some questions for him, didn't you?
I was just letting her talk to him about the fact they had this mutual friend. Oh, okay, so I was just saying, oh yeah, I enjoyed the tour. Thank you so much. I've just been gracious and thanking him for the tour, and it was really great. The next day though, he was at the SSE conference, and we did talk to him because she talked to him more about this mutual friend.
Okay, yeah.
And she keeps quoting him. Lorianne keeps quoting him this very interesting thing. This is Colm Kelleher, where he brought up something about triangles, like triangle ships. Yeah. And she said something about, yes, I saw one once, and I said, so did I. I saw a couple on my tour, like 9 times, triangles, 9 tours. And one time, 2 great big ones right over us that were chased by a F-18. And so she's telling him about a close range sighting that she and some other friends had of a triangle. And he looks at her point blank, not like it's saying this questioning, saying this like he knew. You had to be there, but the tone of voice was, oh, was it theirs or was it ours? Not like he questioned that, like he knew for a fact that there were theirs and ours. Wow. Now, of course, you would know that, but it was his candidness because of the way we were talking to him, that they had this mutual friend. It kind of was like foot in the door, And the day before, he rolled his eyes back. So at this point, the gloves are off. We know who each other are, and everything. And so for him to say, well, was it ours or was it theirs? You know, point blank. And she thought for a second, and her answer to him was, it was probably ours. You know? And I later told her, why would you think that given the nature of your sighting? But okay, you know, but in the moment, you know, and he nodded like, okay, you know, like it was just like understood. There's theirs and ours, and it was one or the other. You know? But it was his point blank attitude about it that was very, very telling, you know.
So people have a lot of fear. So I think I asked you, but have you ever been threatened? Have you ever felt threatened for your life in terms of?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What
Oh
did they say to you?
well, and that's another thing. I hope, I've always said this. My being friends, I even had this discussion with Ron Blackburn and with Jack Houck when he was alive, which is I'm hoping that my friendship with some of these guys offers me a little bit of protection.
Okay.
I'd like to think that it does. I don't know that it does. I think it does. I think it has. I think I'm left alone by the covert guys. It says bad internet connection. We okay?
I'm still okay here.
Okay. So I would like to think it offers some protection, knowing them. But going back to what you were saying, yeah, no, I've absolutely been threatened. In one of my MILAB experiences, I had a gun put to my head.
Oh.
Don't shut up, you know.
But they should know that you can't shut you out.
I've been roughed up where it's in some of those pictures of bruises on my body after being roughed up and stuff a little bit are in my presentation. So if people look at my 2 presentations on UFO Denmark, my MILAB one, I mean, not, you know, I don't have pictures of my bruises and stuff in my Minders 40-year history of the working group, but my MILAB one, I do. And, but yeah, now some people have had it rougher than I have. I've had the threat or attempt of rape, but to the best of my knowledge, never actually had that happen in one of my MILABs. Some women do. I've been roughed up a little. I have multiple male cases that had the kind of crap beat out of them that put them in the hospital, you know.
Okay.
In my presentation, I have some pictures of some of that. Other people have had a gun put to their head and threatened not to talk. Just about every MILAB experience involves a level of threat. That's one thing, you know, Joss and I talked about that one experience where we were taking, that one we already mentioned, is there wasn't any threat. You know, it seemed like they were testing us for psi. They were being extremely grateful that we, you know, demonstrated ability or whatever, and that they were very, you know, interested in that. They seemed to be thanking people. There was maybe implied threat because there were guards and stuff, so you knew you weren't going to act out in that situation, because even if you did, you weren't going to get very far, you know, whatever, you know. So there's implied threat because there were armed guards and stuff, but at the same time, it didn't seem that there wasn't any threatening language or anything. Yet in some past experiences, it's been very threatening, you know. And all these things I'm saying, you know, I just had a new case come to me that was referred to me by somebody that had someone, an individual who's come up repeatedly as an interrogator in these situations. Yeah. She came to me and said that that person was her interrogator, and that during that interrogation, another guard was stood next to her with a gun to her head the whole time. So, you know, and thank God I haven't had the rape scenario that other people have had. You know, yeah, I mean, and that, thank God I haven't been beat up in any situation worse. I think every time they wanted something from me, I've been maybe argumentative, but, you know, compliant, physically compliant in the experiences. And so therefore, you know, I haven't been mishandled, but I certainly have other cases that have, you know, and yeah, you know, and a lot of people get extremely intimidated, like we were discussing earlier. People pull out of the field, you know. And, you know, I've had, I think like 5 different abductees say this line to me verbatim, like in interviewing them and everything. They say, I just want my life back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've had that very thing said to me a number of times, you know, and so some people pull out of the field and everything because they want that. Now, sometimes it's just because of the family situations or career situations. But sometimes it's because they ended up having MILAB stuff that got really bad, that they said, this ain't worth it, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
And yet there are people that had it bad and talk, like Leah Haley, no, not Leah Haley, like, oh gosh, come on, Melinda. Where's my head out today? I'll think of it in just a second, but yeah. You know, there are some people that had it bad and still remain public. Thank God.
But that didn't affect you. I mean, in terms of shutting up. I mean, they didn't by a long shot, or did you sort of pull away from it at time? It's almost like it almost inspires you to go out and to do it. Because I mean, if they really wanted to shut you up, they would just get rid of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, what's changed now? Like why? Like you always say, you don't owe anybody anything. Why are you so fearless now in terms of talking?
If I spend a bunch of time talking to Jim Semivan about my MILAB experiences, and, you know, just if anyone out there's a case of mine, of course, I never say names without someone's permission. I would never say names to these. Any name I mention in my presentations, I've done so with permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, or at least they're very public about it already, where I know I can say their name because they're already public about it. So it's either permission or implied permission because they're already very public. But there are cases that I have whose either names I don't share or I use a fictitious name. And certainly in talking to Jim, even if someone's public, I ain't mention names to any of those guys, ever. Yeah. I'm not mentioning, if they bring it up, that's one thing, but I ain't bringing it up.
Yeah.
But if I talk about my research and my personal experiences with him, I'm going to have a serious discussion with him where, you know, I guess it's just a risk I take, but I'm going to tell him, I'm going to say, hopefully I'm not risking and putting myself in danger by talking to you, you know. Yeah. And, but so far, I feel that my connection to all these working group guys, in its own kind of weird way, and, you know, my, I guess, friendship with them is some kind of safety.
Yeah. And you did say one of the things to get them to leave you alone is to be very public, because you mentioned it as well with, like, everybody knows who you are. You told a story about Hal Puthoff, that you'd never met him and he knew who you were.
Oh, yeah.
At this conference.
That was at an IRVA, not this one, at an IRVA conference many, many years ago. It was in Texas, many, many years ago. And I got out of a lecture, and the lecture that I don't remember who it was now, but when I came out, there's, you know, the lecture room emptied into this big hallway, you know, in a conference facility, right? And I come out and I'm standing in the hallway for a second, trying to decide, okay, am I going to go to the bathroom or am I going to go out to the lobby, you know, the hotel or whatever? And, or maybe there's like a vendor area, you know, whatever. So I'm just pausing for a sec. And all of a sudden, from the other end of this long hallway, I hear someone go, "Hi, Melinda." And I turn. And it's, at the time, Ingo Swann was still alive. So it was Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and Ingo Swann at the far end of the hallway, all waving at me like I'm like some long lost friend. You know, I'm like, "Oh, hi, guys." I mean, from the end of a hallway, I had just come out and barely paused, and I just started to step. In fact, I think I paused and was already starting to walk across, and I hear this, and I look expecting to see some friend. But then at this last IRVA SSE conference, I sat in a lecture room right in front of Hal. They had like these narrow tables, like for, you know, lecture rooms sometimes have a narrow table so you can take notes, you know, and so we're all lined up at these tables. And I didn't realize going in. So when I go to get up, he's right behind me. And so I turn and I say, "Hi, how nice to see you." And he acted like he didn't know who I was in that moment. Now he's gotten older, you know, so it could have been, you know, a legit thing, or he could have just been shocked because suddenly I turned around, because he'd been staring at the back of me or the side of me, you know, the whole time, because I was turning talking to people next to me. So, you know, so either he just didn't remember, or he was just kind of shocked that I turned around and said, "Hi, nice to see you."
Yeah, I would think for a lot of them, you'd be like fear to have run into you, because it's not like somebody who's just going to be sort of polite. If you got some questions, oh, there you are. No, it's like, no, Melinda, run for the door.
I hope you're right.
That's what as I said, that's what I appreciate about you, is that you basically, you'll come right up to the man and say, "I've got questions for you." And you force the issue in terms of, because you have a background in knowledge where they can't snow you on some stupid answer that,
well,
you know.
these guys are pro. I don't doubt for a minute that they can snow me, but I would hope that they would have a moment of at least being honest, or like Jim saying, "Can't talk about that." You're like, "Core secret," you know?
Yeah, core secret.
So, you know, Jim hasn't said those words, but he's said the equivalent, you know, like, "No, can't," you know, and not really, you know, he'll backpedal or avoid something, or just say, "I can't go there," you know, and that's okay, you know, because these guys, I don't doubt they're such pros. They know what they can say, what they can't say.
Yeah.
And they're not, you know, they're only going to say what they can. And, but you're probably right. I think they probably panic when I come towards them. Oh no.
and it is, we have to point out for people who didn't see the first couple of episodes we did, is that you are the only person that Jim Semivan's talking to, no matter what anybody might want to say about whether he's trying to.
All the other guys are talking to various people. I mean,
yeah.
you know, a few of them are talking to Knapp and Alejandro Rojas and Chase Koletsky and Richard Dolan, and, you know, but so everybody's got their people. But I, according to Jim, I'm still the only one he's talking to.
Yeah. And that
might
may
change.
be because
I told Jim, I said, I joked with him. I said, "Jim, you have permission to talk to anybody you want." Like I would never have me say so, you know. But so far he says I'm it, and it's just because we met through this mutual friend that came on my tour, and you think, well, why would he keep talking? Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why I want to talk to him. I mean, got my foot in the door and hopefully learn what's going on with TTSA and et cetera, you know. But, and the shenanigans behind the scenes, and they're meeting with senators or whatever, you know. Okay. Not that they're telling me everything. He's really guarded, and, you know, it's basically, I have to think of the right questions to ask, you know.
Yeah.
But everyone would say, "Well, why is he talking to you?" That's twofold. Response number one to that is good question. Why is he spending time, energy on me at all? A. B is, as he has stated, his extreme interest in the MILAB stuff, and because of his own personal abductions.
Yeah.
I think I'm someone he can talk to. I think because I have not said some things where he said don't, and they were all really minor, but I think we established a certain amount of trust.
Yeah.
And but, you know, again, Danny says, never forget this guy. He said, "Melinda, this guy's background is he trained people how to do this."
Yeah. But he does have the background as well of being an experiencer, which plays a big part in his game.
And his interest in the MILAB is probably because he's been an experiencer and he knows enough and he's asked around enough to know it goes on, but it was outside of his purview, so he has real questions about it.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted, now I've skipped my mind. The other thing is, it's almost like the idea where they have two options. They either can go and try to shut Melinda Leslie up or kill her, which isn't going to work very well. It's going to be pretty public. Or they come beside you, because didn't you mention to me before
Don't get any ideas, guys.
There you go. Didn't you mention before that you had one of the working group had come to you and said, we're here to spin the story and keep you away from classified material? So if he's walking beside you, they're sort of just directing you the way they want you to go. Because if they're adversarial to you, they don't get anywhere. But if they can sort of direct you and get you going in the direction they want you to go, it's to their advantage.
Yes. And back when I was communicating regularly with Ron Blackburn, it came up where I said, how do you guys feel about my writing the book? He said, oh, we want you to do it. My MILAB book. And you think, well, why would they want that? For the reason you're just saying. If they can have some influence or control or be nice to me, then I'm not going to say anything negative or whatever the heck, So but that's constantly, I constantly run that by, like, I don't want to be compromised at all in the truth. And so part of me is like, I want everyone to know, I want to stick with the truth and the facts, and certainly when it comes to the MILAB subject. And if it means pissing these guys off, then so be it, because I'm going to stick to the facts.
Yeah.
And
they have been helpful. I mean, Blackburn and Jim, I mean, they've interacted with you on that subject. It's not like a subject, don't go there, doesn't exist or anything. They're sort of interacting with you. Yeah.
They're confirming its reality, and Ron said, I said, why are you guys supporting the book? He says, we're curious what you're going to say.
Yeah. So you're doing the book?
Oh yeah, that. Eventually,
Eventually.
I'll get back. I'm still getting moved in my new house, so everything's.
Oh, no excuses. No excuses. I can help you. We publish books, so I know I can help you set it up. I can show you how it's done. It's not even that bad. Even if you did an oral history, I mean, you go through, like, a lot of people are doing oral history books now, because a lot of people will, instead of reading a book, they'll get it on like an oral thing, and you can go through just the.
Well, I'm kind of old school. I want the thing you hold in your hands too.
Yeah.
And also to say, I did this. You know what I mean? That's kind of.
But you have to document it. You never know. You may end up, getting cancer, or something's going to happen, and because you've got the only. I mean, and when it comes to MILAB material, there is nobody but you, Melinda, that's got this. There's nobody else can write the book.
Well, there are some other people doing it, but.
I think you're the authority. I think you're the go-to person.
Cases and maybe not as much depth knowledge. There's a few knowledgeable people. Someone who just wrote a book, and she's waiting for me. I'm writing the foreword for it. So she's waiting to publish till I write the foreword. Oh God, I'm so blanking out on names today.
That's not good. If you're writing a foreword, that's not good. You can't.
Yeah, I know.
We'll have to cut this part.
Nadine Lalich.
Oh, okay.
Where she wrote this book about her. Now she's written other books, kind of an overview, and she's done some books with Barbara Lamb, where she helped Barbara. Okay.
Yeah.
But now she's writing her own book specifically about her own abduction experiences and her MILAB experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a major public MILAB case, who decided it's finally time to be public in a big way. She's had extensive MILAB stuff. And so she gave me the final draft for me to read.
Yeah.
And I told her, she knows I just moved. So, between now and between now and Thanksgiving, let's say, I'll get it read and I'll write the foreword for it.
You could get Jim Semivan to write the foreword for your book. Well, there you go. Then it would sell.
Yeah.
The people would actually start believing you that you actually know him then. Because, a lot of people will say, I don't know if that story's true.
Next time
why would they talk to Melinda?
Next time he comes here, it's time selfie, man. It's going down. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, before you say a thing, I'll say, I'm not talking to you for 2 days till you let me do this.
With his wife there, because that's something you didn't mention. And same with Blackburn. Blackburn comes with his wife sometimes, and so does Jim. So, I mean, it's not like it's a secret clandestine meeting in a closet somewhere.
No.
Yeah, I mean, his wife is listening to this whole conversation as well.
I have a picture with Blackburn and his wife.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Talk a little bit about him, because I don't.
One of our conversations with Ron Blackburn and he let me record the whole thing, and he said some
Wow.
amazing things
He let you
in
record
that
it.
some of the things he said I have in that presentation, in both my presentations. I have some stuff from him. You know,
Wow.
he said some amazing stuff to me, and that I got on recorded, on here, I recorded, you know,
Wow.
but
Amazing.
not video. We were out at lunch and he let me record it, and I recorded like a 2-hour conversation with him.
So when are you going to make that public? Because he's an
Maybe
interesting
Jim will let
guy.
me record my conversation with him, maybe.
Because that would be good stuff. You saw the one he did with Jerry
He hasn't
Pippin, didn't
yet,
you?
but maybe he will. Oop, you froze. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You saw the one he did with Jerry Pippin, didn't you?
Yes, yes,
Blackburn's an interesting guy. If you ever
yes.
get that public, I mean, I would really be interested in that because he's the kind of guy where he's sort of like, you know, almost like Jim Semivan. I can't talk about that, but I can talk about this. And he talks about the patent that he has for you know, stopping the sonic boom on a jet fighter plane. He got it from the UFOs, watching videos and stuff.
Well,
He's an interesting guy.
and he's very much a, you know, well, you know how this works. People who are this close, like these guys, this subject, they're all contactees too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's been known for years that John Alexander's a contactee. You know, it's obviously know that Semivan is,
Eric
and
Davis.
Ron Blackburn is.
Eric
If
Davis.
Hal or what?
Eric Davis.
And Eric Davis is, yeah.
Yeah, Jack
And so
Sarfatti.
that
Yeah,
mean
there's a lot of them.
is Kit and Hal and Colm Kelleher and stuff? Probably, you know. So I wouldn't, you and I would not be surprised to learn that any of these other guys are, because I mean, already we just mentioned 4 or 5 of them that we know are contactees.
Yeah.
So, you know, you think, what's their motivation? Well, there you go. That's their motivation.
Yeah. They're going to the expert. They're going to Melinda to figure out what's going on.
Do they have a real desire to know? Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Really 1 foot inside where they really know what's going on? Absolutely.
Yeah. They're just at a higher level. They're like sort of pros who have almost like the thing with Kit Green, the story about Kit Green. Always wanted to get briefed in on the alien autopsy thing, and he could never get briefed in. So he knew some of the stuff, but it's like, I need to know the rest of it. And they're all scrambling like you and I, trying to figure out what's going on.
My research associate, Randy Kopang, who I've done so much of this research with, especially the working group research and the MILAB, both for 28 years I've known Randy, calls it covert ufology. Or ufology, they're covert ufology.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's a good way to look at it. Covert ufology.
Wow. Did you have a chance to listen to, I sent you an audio tape of one of them. He's an experiencer talking about this conspiracy thing. Did you listen to the audio I sent you? Interview where Eric Davis says this is a conspiracy theory, the idea that there's a government behind this thing, that they're leaking this material out.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you still think I think it's bizarre. You mentioned the same thing, or when you get to New York Times, Washington Post.
Conversations, definitely the one in person and one other on the phone, and maybe even a second one on the phone, but at least the one in person and one on the phone, where Semivan told me that this is green lighted by the Pentagon.
Yeah, that would make sense. You don't have the Washington Post and New York Times and Politico all going the same day with the story when they've never done a UFO
that
story.
Stuff out.
Yeah.
You know, but it was done backdoor channels, so there's plausible deniability.
Exactly. That's the word. Plausible deniability.
Involved, you know, coming up with this stuff like, well, they're disavowing whether, you know, and the whole thing with the Navy saying, yes, those are our videos, but we didn't release them. There's plausible deniability, so there's a constant spin of how fast this disclosure is going.
Yeah. You slow it down by throwing mud in the water. Nobody knows who to believe or what's really real.
But you guys, and it's also the assumption that all parts know what all parts are doing. There's compartmentalization. So this is green lighted at one level, but the public spokesperson that the news is going to maybe doesn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, so it can get complicated that way. So could they, you know, say some disparaging things about Lou to deflect, to slow down, and, you know, and you know, it's like, okay, it's gaining too much momentum, so we need to slow it down a little, or whatever, you know.
I agree.
And it could be, again, that the people you're going to aren't part of the people that know that, you know. So if it was very closed door, behind the scenes, you know, it's not, again, the Pentagon's a it's a big building with a lot of departments, you
Yeah.
know, and they don't all know what the other one's doing, you know. Now they should be able to find out, but also at the covert level, they can't find out. They don't have the need to know. So need to know can compartmentalize in such a way as to be very useful also to deflect attention, you know. But he did tell me at least twice, I think 3 times, that it was green lighted by the Pentagon. So
For that alone,
you
I
guys,
appreciate
no,
that you got, I
well, and
appreciate just that alone,
that's, yeah.
that you got
And
the answer for that.
maybe it's open to, you know, well, what did he mean by that? You know, well, you know, at some level, because like you and I were just saying, you can't take it front page in the New York Times, front page of the Washington.
Oh, my sound is going, Melinda.
That's what?
My
Yeah,
sound
we're
is
cutting in
gone.
and out.
Well, yeah, we'll have to cut it. I have to actually go anyway.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
Can
I'll
you
have
hear
to
me
actually
now?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can actually hear you. I've actually got to go. I had one more question for you, but we'll have another
Okay.
update with Melinda maybe next week or the week after. I wanted to get one thing because I'm doing a lecture on Apports in a couple of weeks.
These 2 videos up, Grant. Put these ones we've done up, you know.
Yeah, well, it's Desta puts them up, so she's got the other one that we did, and we will stick this up. And the last question I wanted to ask you is about Apports. Did you mention the fact that Stan Romanek had an Apport thing where his camera ended up on a fan? Do you
Well, I
tell
think
us?
he had a bunch of those he had a bunch of that kind of stuff happen. You
Did
guys,
you?
look, I know Stan's a controversial case. Do not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
the man had real experiences.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that for a minute. He had real MILAB experiences.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree.
And these guys in the working group were going and spending the night at his house multiple times, multiple days, week in a row. So if they were going there and spending the night, they thought his case had that reality to it.
Yeah, that's what Stan told me, that John Alexander had said when he was there for a couple of days. This is the real deal. So when I asked John about it, he said, "Oh no, it's just poltergeist stuff going on." And I'm going, "What? Like,
no.
Yeah, so they were following him too.
Yeah. These guys spend the night at his house. Yeah. No, it's yeah.
I appreciate it, Melinda. Let's do this again. Let's do this again in a couple of weeks. I have more questions for you, and I appreciate your expertise in what you do, and get working on the book. Get working on the book.
I appreciate everything you do very, very much, and
we're on the same path, I think.
Yeah,
in terms of consciousness and in terms of the importance of the working group. I think a lot of people are coming on board now. They suddenly realize, oh, we should watch what these guys are saying. We should watch what these guys are doing it. And we have to point out that you and I have been watching these people for like 30 years and saying, watch these people. They know what's going on.
You and I and my research associate, Randy, you know,
yeah.
and we'll give a little tip of the hat to Dolan's paying attention to them now too. And, you know, or has, but even more so. Yeah. More so in great part because of you and me, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
And other people, you know, so we're certainly, you know, not alone. Obviously George Knapp's been very closely paying attention to them since day one that he entered this game.
Yeah,
he's been closely involved with them. So, you know, we're certainly not alone, but we're taking it there. We're you and I and Randy, who's kind of behind the scenes, but working with me. We're willing to push that envelope and say some stuff that other people aren't saying.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate it. And just for, I'll end it with this, is you did the 2 videos on UFO Denmark. If you just put Melinda Leslie, UFO Denmark, they're on my presidential UFO Facebook things. I think you should get Researcher of the Year award for those two things. It was really, really good research. And I'm glad you spelled it out, and anything I can do in the future.
It's a lot of years of work that went into those, you know, and every time I lecture, nothing goes away. I just keep adding. And yet I have to, you know, when you give a lecture at a conference or an event, the most you're going to have is an hour and a half. You got to like edit and take stuff out, you know, when you keep adding. Yeah. But luckily with UFO Denmark, I had the time to go more in depth.
Absolutely.
And I'm speaking, like I said, for UFO Con in the end of February. UFOcon2020.com. And I'm not talking about either of these subjects at all.
Oh,
What I'm going to talk about is my own personal alien abductions. Lorianne said, when's the last time you lectured on your own alien abduction experiences? And I went, like over 20 years ago.
wow.
So I'm going to lecture about my own alien abduction experiences, about the consciousness component of it as well as the hybridization, all the various parts, including some traumatic things. I'm going to, fully cover that. And I'm basing it on, because I had to kind of come to terms with, do I want to do that? I admittedly, everyone, I'm uncomfortable talking about my own alien abduction experiences, but I thought, okay, we can't ask for others to disclose the truth if we're not willing to disclose our own personal truths.
Right. Yeah.
So I take it as, this is my disclosure. This is my disclosing my personal truth in hopes that it will help other experiencers, abductees, contactees to disclose their personal truth. And because if we aren't willing to disclose, how can we ask anyone else, any official capacity for disclosure if we're not disclosing? So there you go. That's
my friend Peter from San Diego has the famous expression I now use all the time: closets are for clothes.
Closets are for clothes.
There you go.
So
are they live broadcasting that? Are they going to do a live feed or?
I don't think it'll be live. She always has Dennis Whipple, come and other people. But Dennis brings a crew, and so it is being taped.
Good.
And eventually, those will be put up, probably in a pay-per-view format after the fact.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to yours. I'm looking forward to hearing your. I'm not even sure I've ever heard you give that lecture. In terms, did you fly the ship?
I haven't even included much, in my MILAB presentation, a little of my own stuff works in, sure.
Yeah.
But my own alien abduction stuff, I haven't given a lecture on in well over 20 years.
Beautiful. Did they let you fly the ship? Did the aliens let you fly the ship?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Because that's I have 50 cases. I think I got about 7 or 8 of them from you. I mean, that's one of my things I'm most fascinated with. And that's where I remember I talked to Ray Hernandez and he said, well, people experience a lot of stuff on the ship. And I said, but when they start flying the ship, I think we should start paying attention to what's going on. I mean, and there are 14% of all experiencers say they've flown the ship. And that fascinates me.
Yeah, they fly the ship or get shown the propulsion navigation. I've been shown propulsion stuff extensively, which is, one of the things that the covert guys wanted to know. That's one thing Jim wants to know. So all that stuff. That stuff is common for abductees. I mean, when I say common for abductees, once an abductee remembers a lifetime of experiences, multiple experiences, starts to get a lot of regressions, also has a lot of conscious remembrance. Once you become what one researcher in the field calls an advanced abductee, once you are like that, you've had all those things. You've had all those things. So it's common amongst those more complicated advanced abduction cases that you've had all those things.
Your wealth of knowledge, Melinda Leslie, I am honored to even just to talk to you, to get it out of you. Seriously, I mean, you have
and me to you.
You have a lot. You have a lot of information that I can see why they're contacting you. So let's do this again in a couple of weeks. I'll come up with some more questions and we'll do it again.
One last little shameless self-promotion here. Besides I talked about the conference for Lorianne, UFOcon2020.com, but I'm also doing a Skywatch for the Human Origins Conference in April.
Wow.
Human Origins, I'm doing a big, military night vision, Skywatch for them.
Where's that?
Next year, they asked me to speak a year from now, like 2021, I'm going to speak, but 2020, next April, I'm just doing the Skywatch. That's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I think the website's humanorigins.com.
Okay.
But if you look up Human Origins online, you'll find their please look up that website. It's going to be an amazing conference. And of course, here in Sedona, I do my UFO sighting tours. I also do psychic readings and classes as well. And so if you come to Sedona, get a reading, take a class, or come on my UFO sighting tour, of course. So there's a little shameless self-promotion.
You deserve it. Thank you, Melinda. Let's talk again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Grant.
Okay. Bye-bye.